Please welcome to the stage, Jean-Luc Peck.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Jean-Luc Peck, and I am the Deputy CISO and Lead Consultant for Critical Informatics, or CI Security. We're based out of Bremerton, and we are a combination of managed detection and professional services, but we work in the security space. This morning, I'm going to talk about a few incident response engagements and investigations that we performed recently. First, a little bit about me. My background is in infrastructure engineering and supercomputers. I used to plug things in and make them go fast, and then I would hand them off to specialists who would do interesting things with them, like trying to save the world from malaria and global warming. Today, my time is split between enterprise risk management and incident response services, and I also manage and support our internal security controls and compliance of our company with Mike Hamilton, who is CI's founder and the former CISO for the city of Seattle. I'm here to talk about what we've seen in IR engagements over the last couple of years, how we are all witnessing, but also in the middle of, a change in the incident response landscape. As you expect, everything you're about to see here has been anonymized, but everything actually occurred. Before we dig in too far, I would like to ask some questions of the audience. So please raise your hand if you work with or you support an incident response team. Now, this might be formal, or it could be just you get called in when stuff goes wrong. Pretty good numbers. Now, who uses Office 365 or Azure as part of production? Excellent. And who here actually works on the Office 365, the Azure, or the ATP teams? Way cool. All right. Thank you for having me here today, and here we go. So first up, number one, this incident was with a company called Stargazer Foods. They are a food manufacturer who make health-conscious protein bars and snack foods. They've got a hybrid environment that's split between Office 365, Azure, their on-prem services, and a manufacturing environment with a lot of IoT gear. They also have a field sales team who spend weeks on the go with their laptops and all the good and bad that comes with. So a sales rep laptop triggered an AV alert one day. Stargazer calls us up and says, hey, we got this alert for a laptop. It's crypto something or another. We don't know if it's bad. We just need to understand more of what's going on. Can you guys come in and do your forensics thing and tell us what happened? So the risks of something like this, as you imagine, are not trivial, but they could be, but they could also be supremely devastating for the business. Malware could get loose, potentially bring down the manufacturing line, impacting production, or something could be phoning home somewhere. They've also got client data and normal business operations stuff, which we need to be aware of. So we get on site and we sit down and start talking with them. One of the first things we ask is, what have you done so far? What containment or response steps have you taken so far? And they run us through it. First, they disconnected the laptop from the network. This is good. They turned off Wi-Fi. Then they disabled the employee's AD account. This is good. And then we unjoined it from the domain. But other than that, we haven't touched it. We've just left it alone. Now, I'm sure some of you are seeing what might be wrong with this picture. And so we're talking on the phone, and we're like, yeah, this is good, this is good. No, wait, back up a second. So if you've never had cause to do it before, when you remove a computer from a domain, when you unjoin it from an Active Directory domain or Azure AD, there's a lot of changes which happen on the computer. Files get changed, system information gets changed, you lose network information about user accounts, and it often reboots the computer at least once. So if you're coming in to do a forensic analysis of a system where you want it to be more or less intact from the moment of the incident, this is not great for preserving evidence, and in fact can actually spoil very critical evidence to understand what the incident contained, what it was. But to an IT admin who's just trying to keep something bad from happening to their network, this is actually a very prudent step. They're disconnecting it from their environment, and so it makes sense. Now, I want to be very clear. This is not the client's fault. This is not a mistake on the client's part. This was actually a process failure on my part, because we didn't tell them not to. But I bring this up because it's a very excellent example of how somebody doing what they think is right could detrimentally affect an investigation. Now, a process failure on my part, that one's easy to fix. So we wrote up this little document, which now we hand out every time somebody calls and says the word forensics. And we make sure that they have a copy of it so that they can see, all right, leave the computer alone, don't remove it from the domain, do disconnect it from your network. These are all good things. Boom, problem solved. Process changes, yay. But back to Stargazer. We get on site, we image up the laptop, and we used a commercial tool that's very well used in the industry, very common. The laptop's drive was built in, wasn't a normal SATA drive that we could remove or we could take back with us. And so we image it up to a USB disk, and we get our little text output file from the process that says, yay, everything's hashed all right, and the image check came across great, all the data's good. We get it back to our lab, and we start investigating. And pretty quickly, we see that we're able to see the files. Like, we can see all the system files, we can see all the data, we see what we're expecting, but we can't actually see anything within those files. There's no content that's being analyzed there. We take a closer look and we say, this looks like it might actually be encrypted. So we call the client back and we say, hey guys, did you happen to get BitLocker running on this laptop? And they're very proud. They go, yeah, we pushed it out by GPO. It's all working. We have to print out the recovery keys, and we keep track of those in a filing cabinet, but hey, you know, we're getting there. So, okay, all right. We know we have a problem because we've imaged up this laptop that's full of encrypted data, and even though our tool can see it, it can't actually see it. So we go back on site. We work with them to decrypt the drive. We get it imaged up again. We bring the data back to our lab, which we can now read. We clearly find that the laptop user was deliberately running a crypto miner for personal profit and doing other bad stuff generally. So we send them the report and we say, here's what we found, here's all the evidence that we see, it's over to you guys, you can make a decision about how to proceed. Then internally at CI, we take a look at what happened here. How did we image up a drive that was full of encrypted data and bring it back? We take a look at our processes, and again, we hold a retrospective. We make improvements. That's great. But this engagement had a good result in the end. We were able to confirm the finding, and we gave them the evidence they needed. We had technical issues we were able to overcome. But the thing that I want to communicate here is that this is ultimately the same forensic analysis process that we've been using for the better part of 20 years, quite probably even longer. Ultimately, you're making a copy of a computer, you're taking it back to a lab, you're diving into it and exploring what's happened, and you're putting together data and you're sending it back to the client. It's all very manual, very human involved. It's not good, it's not bad, it's just a data point. On to incident number 2. Farragut Realtors. These guys are a property management company in North Carolina. They are all Office 365. They have no servers, they have no on-premise environments other than a little wireless access point and a switch for a few employees who work out of an office. Otherwise, the rest of their sales team, about 400 agents who are working across the state, are all working on their endpoints, their PCs, their Macs, their mobile devices. Now, they've got customer information which they handle. Property forms, resident forms and information. They've also got a ton of financial information about their clients and their tenants for paying rent, paying the property owners what they're owed, escrow payments especially. But they don't know that they have this information. As far as they're concerned, it all just lives in email. So you might be seeing part of the problem here as well. So Farragut, our all Office 365 client with effectively unmanaged endpoints, got phished. In particular, Amanda in finance got phished. And, like most victim orgs at first, they didn't know they got phished. They only discovered they got phished. Whoops, my animations. They only figured out they got phished when sending a wire transfer for the 3rd time to a second new bank account for the same customer and decided, no, something doesn't seem right here, which is good. That's a good awareness to have. But you can see by this point, there's some damage which is already done. Some money's already gone out the door. So they've already done an impressive amount of investigating by the time we go out and we meet with them. By the time we're there, they've already found the suspicious emails that Amanda had not sent, but which were strangely in her sent items folder. They spotted where the attacker was using different lingo in these emails. They all ended with kindly, and that's not how Amanda ends her emails. And so we start diving into this with them. They've got a phenomenal amount of paper trail evidence already. They've got these printed emails, they've got faked documents with forged signatures and bank account information that goes to strange bank accounts that nobody'd ever seen before. It's all ready and organized for us, and we sit down with them and we're like, yeah, this is a great job, fantastic. They also had their bank stop the wire transfers, which were in progress, also a very prudent step. They had reset their bank passwords, they had enabled MFA for their financial accounts, and they had started resetting their Office 365 accounts. So by the time we're talking with them, I'm like, hey, you guys are doing great. What do you need us for here? But that's where they got stuck, because after they had reset those passwords, the attacker was still there. They were still getting emails coming in from this bad actor. So clearly the attacker had persistence inside the domain. So they give us access to their Azure AD environment, and we start investigating. Now there's one key detail here, which is out of the norm for a realty agency in North Carolina. Who thinks they see it? Yeah, this didn't look like North Carolina to me either. Now, I actually didn't know where this was. I had not heard of this. And so we pop over to Bing it with Google, and then we learn pretty quickly that no, Sumi is in fact a long way from North Carolina. But we keep digging, and soon we see that's not the only problem. Now, who thinks they see it? Go on, hands up if you think you see it. Yep. Who uses Skype in a web browser? That's just crazy. We've got Teams these days. I mean, what's going on here? This is obviously bad. I'm kidding, of course, because we know that London is nowhere near North Carolina either. So by this point, we've got at least one account in a very critical position that's been owned from multiple locations that are very clearly not where the client is. And we also know that just resetting passwords is not going to be enough to kick them out. It didn't work once already, so doing it again is just not going to work. Now, as risk managers and incident responders, part of what we do is we think about how bad could this get. We're thinking about what are the risks that we could see here. So we know that through the logs and compromised email accounts that malware could be a thing, including remote access tools going onto these computers, coming in through PDF email attachments with these banking forms. We know that they're at risk of losing financial and customer data because most of it lives inside their Office 365 email accounts. And this could be potentially a very bad day for a lot of people, not just the business, but also their clients, their tenants, and their property owners. We know that the bad actors could have very interesting ways of sticking around. And so I was concerned particularly about the potential for malware here, having come through in those attachments. So before we started doing any major remediation work, any major cleanup work, we had to analyze those emails, we had to analyze those attachments because we needed to understand, were they malicious or were they just forged documents? And we needed to do it in a hurry. Now, for malware analysis, we could spin up something like Flare VM or Cuckoo Sandbox, and we could dive into it by hand. These would work well. These are great tools. We use them a lot. But they're not fast. They're not quick, like set it and forget it and go off and do a bunch of other work kind of fast. With all of these tools, you have to build the VM, you got to deploy the tools, you got to wait for it all to compile and install together, you got to load the malware, and then you got to do the analysis by hand. You're the one loading them up, you're the one doing the work. There's a lot of streamlining and automation in these, but it's still a very manually laborious process. We're talking hours, if not days worth of analysis effort to do it right and to really be sure. Another option that investigators use quite commonly, VirusTotal or hybrid analysis. These services, again, they're fantastic, and these two especially because they put them out there for free. You don't even need an email account in order to throw a file up there and understand, is this malicious? Has this been seen by antivirus agents before? They'll take your file, they'll run it through a whole bunch of scanning agents and VM types. They'll tell you if the file's up to no good. Did it try and phone home? Is it calling strange IP addresses and coming out of a text file or something you wouldn't expect? I love these services, but there's a catch. By submitting your file to VirusTotal, you are asking VirusTotal to share your submission with the security community. Now, for random malicious emails with, here's that zip file you didn't ask for, that's not a big deal. That's great. For client data, for banking information, for private or protected information, this doesn't fly. But hey, we have good news, everybody. Microsoft had an app for that. Turns out this service is fantastic because not only can you submit a file to Microsoft for analysis, and not only is this Microsoft providing a critical security function to another Microsoft customer, remembering this tenant is part of Office 365, but you can specify when the file gets scrubbed. Now, as a compliance guy who has written more than a few audit reports where I've dinged people about record retention problems, this is fantastic. So we submitted the emails through this service. We bundle them all up together, and we send them off in a package. And about 6 hours later, we get a report back saying, yep, hey, all clear. Not only did we run it through the ATP analysis service, we had an analyst take a look over the findings. The analyst confirmed there was nothing funky going on there. It turns out they're just PDFs with phony signatures. So this wasn't a very sophisticated attack. They weren't going for a technical intrusion. They were trying to leverage business processes. It was business email compromise in the traditional sense. So now we move on to remediation. Because we know that changing passwords wasn't going to work, we had to hit them with a 1, 2, 3 punch. So we went user by user, and we started dropping all of the active sessions in progress. And then once the sessions were dumped, we reset everybody's passwords. And then we helped Farragut roll out MFA to all their employees, because MFA is not just a good idea, it's a great idea. Some other controls that we put in place included conditional access policies. So this limits logins to just the US, so we're kicking out all the international users who don't actually work for the company. And even though the emails came back clean, we took a bunch of time and we scanned all the endpoints for safety. We wanted to make sure that there really was no viruses or malware running in there. And then we did some follow-up monitoring and watched their Azure environment for a few months, checking the audit logs and making sure that everything was on the up and up before we gave them the all clear. Fortunately, this one resolved pretty quickly and easily. Once we kicked out the intruders, we were able to confirm that, nope, everything's looking good, and they saw all the funny business take care of itself. So looking back at this one, this gig was a blend of mail sample and log analysis, on-premise endpoint scanning, and helping to implement global technical controls on their Office 365 environment. We used all cloud services for everything, except the endpoint scanning. That was all effectively unmanaged. It wasn't centralized AV. But again, this is a small company. We're talking 5 administrative staff, none of whom are IT, none of whom are technical. They're business people, they're property managers. All they know is that they paid GoDaddy every month and the email kept going until they got hacked from across the planet. So on to incident number 3. Incident number 3 is with Skyheart University. Skyheart University had a phishing event in their Office 365 email environment, very similar to Farragut. A staff member clicked the link, credentials got stolen, and some bad stuff happened. But they didn't actually call us in for this one. They handled that side of the incident already. We weren't involved there. But what they did want is an outside look at their on-premise data center environment, about 800 servers or so that they needed to make sure were free of malware because they didn't want something bad to happen on probably the biggest business day of the year. We knew that this was going to be a tricky one because how could we scan 800 servers in an active production data center across the country, far, far away, looking everywhere that malware might hide without burning time building tools which probably already existed? They didn't want to pay us to reinvent the wheel. And so we talked about some ideas, including using a self-contained antivirus package, something that could live inside of a folder, wouldn't require being installed, but that could run on these computers, could then dump the output to a text file, and then we could gather up all the output data, and we could do a manual analysis, or we could sort them and sift through them. But we wouldn't necessarily see something unique. What we would see is an antivirus agent saying, yep, no, we're good, or hey, I found something, you might want to look at this. So we talked about it with our offensive security team. And we realized that they could threat model methods that they would employ to put something like a timed logic bomb on a network. And we could use those models as a jumping off point. So we would essentially say, hey, how would you guys hack this? How would you do this? And then we could use that to continue moving into our threat hunting scenario. But both of those options, the antivirus and the custom threat hunting, they're super complex. They're highly customized. And they would have a high probability of missing something very critical or unique to this particular attack. But as we were working through this, something happened, and I got a call about an internal control issue which came up that needed eyes on it. So I hopped over to our Defender ATP instance, which we had rolled out internally sometime before, to take a look at whatever was going on. And again, this is our computers on our network that I'm looking at. And it was a false positive that day. That was no big deal. But as I'm doing this, it hit me what I was looking at. And in this moment, I literally have one proposal scope of work up on one screen, and I've got ATP up on the other. I realized that I was staring at a cloud-based telemetry threat hunting system baked into Office 365 and Azure, which we know that they were already at least partly tied into. And we, in particular, had rolled it out to all of our computers with a simple PowerShell script. It was super easy to roll out, and it gave us remarkably rich data for, all told, very little effort. It gives you insanely great threat hunting capabilities, again, for actually very little labor effort compared to deploying something like a SIM or a whole new antivirus environment to 800 servers. And again, we had to make sure that we didn't reboot these servers. Now, I don't know any antivirus agent you can deploy to 800 systems without rebooting at least one of them. And in our case, that was probably going to be something critical like a domain controller. So we reach back out to Skyheart and we say, hey, we know you guys have Office 365, but do you have ATP? And you hear a voice on the other end of the line go, yeah. They weren't sure where we were going with this because all they had seen was ATP working at the domain level, covering things like email, anti-phishing, and safe link scanning. So I say, are your servers running Windows Defender by any chance? They go, yeah, most of them actually. So we talk with them about what this could look like. They would push a simple PowerShell script out to their servers. It starts sending the Defender telemetry up to ATP, and then we could go spelunking through the data to find malware that might or might not be hidden on their servers. And that's all inside the browser. There wouldn't even need to be a VPN connection back over to their data center because they would handle the rollout there. And so we would be able to look at all the data that we needed to from the comfort of our desks right in a web browser. This is phenomenal. The future in this instance is amazing. So we talk them through this, and they push out the no reboot PowerShell script to their system. And then we get to go swim in a data lake without even leaving our chairs. Fortunately, most of the search queries that we ran came back like this. So we could verify that their prod environment looked like it was untouched. That appeared in this instance, the incident was limited to phishing within Office 365, and the hallowed halls of higher education remained open yet another day. So looking back at this one, we had several options for how to achieve this. Some were super complex and technical, some were very straightforward and high level, but only one was quick, easy, low disruption, and gave us a ridiculous amount of data that we could ask super broad or very refined questions of, all without requiring travel, which we would have to bill for, thus increasing client costs. And so this, to me, is the direction that incident response is going. I don't care if you're on Azure, AWS, Google Cloud, Salesforce, or whatever your platform is, the data necessary for incident response and investigations is shifting from on-premise systems up to those cloud environments. Now, that's both good and bad. It's good because it means that you can quickly and easily get huge amounts of data from large numbers of systems, and you can ask big questions of that data without trying very hard. You don't need to go and ask 10,000 servers individual questions and then sift through 10,000 answers. You can ask one database, one question, and you can see all the servers that you need to be concerned about. These logs are also stored in systems which can be very difficult for an attacker to reach, meaning the actual log evidence itself can be protected from tampering or deletion. And especially when you look at this against something like a syslog server, which is just storing local text files on a file server. We also have SIMs, which are using big database servers and systems, but those are ultimately potentially reachable by an attacker, and they could be edited or modified, which would spoil evidence and make investigations even further difficult. But it also means that systems like ATP can use the data and telemetry coming out from endpoint agents that are already widely in use, like Windows Defender. So we don't need to install yet another endpoint agent on some systems which are probably already overloaded, just running line of business types of apps. So this is great, this is fantastic. But there's a shadow side to this. It's bad because it means that not only is each system a little different, the differences between Azure or Google Cloud or AWS, the functions are all very similar, but the ways that they're going about it are all very different from each other. The data can also be hard to extract, like when you need a lot of data for a big client who's generating way more than 50,000 events per day. This can be problematic for investigators. Now, it also means that clients and customers have to push buttons and turn knobs in order to stop Ukraine from being able to log into their email in North Carolina, or to get signals and alerts from Azure to ATP to Power BI and back again. It also means that small businesses who are using these platforms and who probably don't have much in the way of IT staff, let alone security staff, they don't know what they don't know. They just know they pay a bill, the email comes, and business keeps turning. Sometimes they only realize what they don't know after they get hacked. Now, I've got one more quick story. Going back to Stargazer. So Stargazer already had Office 365, and they decided to turn on ATP for their domain. So they were running the email scanning and the safe link scanning. They knew that it could do more, but they weren't exactly sure how. They also wanted to know every time somebody on one of their endpoints ran an installer or any exe. They were very concerned about apps that ran only in user land and did not require administrative credentials to install. So we showed them Defender ATP and the telemetry and all the data it provides, and we walked them through what this can look like during investigations and remediation, and the very rich data set that it provides. Then we showed them the PowerShell script to deploy it. So, we showed them the PowerShell script to deploy it, the one that Microsoft makes nice and easy and pre-packages for you to download, and they loved it. They loved the whole idea. So just like with Skyheart University, we walked them through deploying this, and then we showed them the threat hunting console. Now, this was the big moment for me here. The day after they had pushed this PowerShell script out to all of their computers, and again, this is a Salesforce which is distributed across the country, the better part of 800 or so people, including some on-premise systems, but mostly field users. One person from a 4-person IT team, of which 2 were actually help desk, this one individual starts digging around through telemetry from their full environment to find events in their network that were going to be a threat to their operations. That, to me, is the future of security that we should all be driving for. And so with that, on behalf of myself and the team at CI Security, I'd like to say a very special thank you to Kimberly, Grace, Microsoft, and the BlueHat team for inviting me today. And I'd like to thank you all for your time and attention today. It is truly an honor to be here, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the presentations. Thank you.